of our two-day LCAP workshop. We want to thank you for coming back to day 2 of our LCAP workshop. I'm Adrienne Balcazar, and I would like to introduce the LCAP State and Federal Programs Unit. Today joining us is Debbie Cano, Helen Choi, Augustine Garcia, Rachel Garcia, Jeannie Key, and Anita Lomali. And I also want to introduce our support staff, Maribel Leyva and Carol Thomas. We want to welcome back the Accountability and Data Literacy Unit, Evan Bartelheim and Dr. Hilary Wiseman. And we are also happy to introduce to you Belinda Martinez Garcia and Sean Lewis from Business Advisory Services, who will be walking you through the fiscal components of the LCAP. To access today's presentation, we ask you to click on the link in the chat. All of our resources are conveniently located on our LACO LCAP Canvas page. If you navigate through the page to download, you can download today's presentation. The link on the slide here will give you access to LACO's and CDE's LCAP resources. We also want to let you know that we are recording today's training, and we will be posting the video and the presentation as well as the Q&A on this page for your convenience. For those of you that were not able to join us for day 1, which was held on January 25th, we went over the required components of the 24-25 LCAP template, and you can find the video and PowerPoint presentation posted on our Canvas page at the previous link on that slide. So for today's workshop, I want to explain today's agenda. Our main workshop is from 10 a.m. to 11:30. And then immediately following the workshop, we will be conducting a 20-minute overview for those who will be using the LACO's ELCAP system to develop their 24-25 LCAP. We understand if you cannot stay with us past 11:30 this morning, just rest assured we are recording this presentation and we will be posting it for those of you who cannot attend. And so today we're going to take a deeper look at the key metrics, the action development, the action tables, the budget overview for parents. We'll start to wrap up with the LCAP development and approval timeline and process, and then the LCAP submission, which applies to all LEAs and charters, well, LEAs, all districts and charters. And then we will cover the overview of the ELCAP system. Please place your questions in the chat box and we will answer any simple questions if we can, but we will be following up with written responses in a Q&A that will be emailed to each of you. We are recording again today's training and we will post it on our Canvas webpage. So as we prepare for today's workshop, we want to remind you that there's a strong emphasis on the reflective part of the continuous improvement cycle as you develop your 24-25 LCAP. We left off last day 1 with you thinking about it's a time to reflect, to refresh, to renew, and refine all the work that everyone has been doing in this process. So it's an opportunity to really look at what has been done. And after reflecting on the effectiveness or lack thereof of actions in the prior plan, LEAs have to make decisions as they move forward into the new LCAP development cycle. Will you adopt, abandon, adapt what has been done in the past 3-year LCAP cycle? So these are questions that are at the forefront of the work that's ahead. As we begin today's workshop, again, it's important to see how today's agenda will cover very foundational components needed for the new LCAP cycle. The intent of the standalone 23-24 LCAP annual update template is twofold: to close out the previous 3-year cycle and to allow the LEA to address any goals, actions, and or metrics that will or will not be carried forward in the 24-25 LCAP. So today you will be looking at multiple sources of data, including the California dashboard, in order to share with your parents, teachers, and the rest of your educational partners. And this will set the foundation for the establishment of the 24-25 LCAP. And now Hillary and Evan will take a deeper look at the key metrics.
Thank you, Adrian. Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name, as Adrian said, is Hillary Weissman, and I am joined with my colleague, Evan Bartelheim, and we represent the Accountability and Data Literacy Unit. As Evan and I begin sharing our information and best practices associated with the key metrics, as we can see on the next slide. There you go. We wanted to make sure that we reiterate the significance of not duplicating your efforts. The work that goes into identifying data, measures, and tools to track local indicators, as well as the evaluation and reflection, should inform the development of the LCAP. Work to streamline specific measures that both support the local indicators and can be representative metrics in your LCAP for ease and consistency. As we move along, once again, to help support this process, several years ago, we introduced our LCAP metrics inventory tool, and this year we've updated it to align with the new requirements specified in Ed Code. It's bigger, it's better, it's a quick guide. I don't want to date myself, but it's kind of like Cliff Notes to some degree, but it's not just an inventory checklist of primary data sources and corresponding CalPADS reports, although that's what certainly makes it useful. Its added value is in the additional data considerations that provide clarity and further insight into certain measures. Additionally, we have another handy tool here that we created that's been updated. That's our local indicator guidance and measurement tool. This tool provides updated summary for each of the local indicator processes, along with suggested data sources. It's coupled with questions to enhance your analysis process and key elements to consider adding in your narratives. And we've linked it here for your convenience. And as we move forward, as a reminder, this is an overview of the metrics that are correlated to the 8 state priorities required in the LCAP, which are organized around conditions for learning, engagement, and student outcomes to support whole child development. LEAs are required to address each of the 8 priorities, and these reflect the minimal required metrics for your plan. And measuring progress for student groups. The following is a list of student groups that, when populated with 30 or more individuals, are considered a significant subgroup, and their data will be reported as part of the state's accountability plan. As you can see here by the word new, we have a new student group added to the list. That's our long-term English learners, also known as our LTELs. And similarly to our foster youth and our homeless youth student groups, our LTELs also only need 15 individuals to populate the dashboard at the LEA level, unless you're a charter, at which it populates at the school level. On our next slide here, Evan's going to go into more detail on identifying outcomes for LTELs.
Thank you, Hillary, and good morning, everyone. We do want to take a little pause here. We're going to get into some of the more challenging aspects of generating the metrics, and this is a good place to start with this new guidance. So with regards to the long-term English learners, there are a few key details we wanted to point out. First, this definition is different than the existing definition from Ed Code 313.1, for which the state is annually required to provide each LEA a list of the qualifying students. The state will still be providing that report to LEAs this spring, but it is important to understand that while there will be some overlap between the LTELs based on that old definition, which still exists in Ed Code, and this new definition, they won't be identical. So for the purposes of the new definition, there are fewer criteria than that old definition. So it's likely to result in more students being identified as LTELs for the purposes of accountability, both on the dashboard and who you might need to address within your LCAP. And so for some LEAs that have a small number of LTELs, it's going to be important to establish if the count of long-term English learners within your district or charter meets the numerical significance standard that Hillary just mentioned. So 15 students for a district and 30 in a school level, charter school. And you could generate that through using the 2022-23 CalPAS report 8.1, which is from the end of the year, and you can filter based on the English language acquisition status start date. So if you have questions about that, we'll happy to answer those. But just to get first of all sense, will I be held accountable for these students? Yes or no. Second, it's important to note that while outcomes for this student group are going to be available on the 2024 dashboard, excuse me, it's going to be very difficult for LEAs to establish some baseline data for many of the required metrics on their own. It's a challenge, and it may be hard, not impossible for some measures. And if there's certain things that you're doing that identify students with an SSID, like surveys or something, that might be feasible, but other things might be just close to impossible or really challenging. So I just wanted to note that up front. So let's dive into some of the samples. So on this slide, we thought we'd start with the sample metric just to kind of discuss what a good metric would look like. We wanted to start the conversation with what we consider kind of a rather straightforward required measure, which is that of priority for the results of the summative assessments for English language arts. So now LEAs, of course, have more than one option for which indicator to use when sharing this particular measure. For this sample, we chose to use the California School Dashboard's academic indicator for ELA. And so I just want to direct your attention first to the gold star in the column for the metrics. In this case, I've noted that the metric source is the California School Dashboard. And so we want specificity in terms of identifying your metric. It's very important that you're clear. And in this case, the measure is distance from standard, or DFS. And I also noted that this indicator incorporates results from both the Smarter Balance assessment and the California alternate assessment in grades 3 through 8 and 11. And that's one of the reasons why I would personally choose to use this metric versus, say, the CASP results website, which would list those separately. And it's it's a percentage of students meeting or exceeding standard. That's very commonly used. I like distance from standard better, so that's why I choose this one. Either way, I just want to be really clear on which metric I'm choosing. And in this case, I've also included the URL for where this data source is found, just as an extra convenience for anyone who wanted to look it up. Next, I'll draw your attention to the blue star in the baseline column. And here I'd like to point out that we are using results from the 2023 dashboard. You can see that at the top. And we have included data for all our significant student groups. And as I just mentioned, you might have difficulties generating baseline data for your LTEL student group, for example. So for this example, I'm going to drop the LTELs in as a placeholder because I do expect to have data for this group in the future. And I may want to use this metric to demonstrate effectiveness for an action that I plan for my long-term English learners. And so for some LEAs, it might actually be possible to calculate a reasonable estimate here for if you're trying to get your distance from standard. Maybe you have a fairly small group. You could go back and look at your data for this group, and you could estimate that. I would just make sure if I did something like that, I would be very specific, and I would make sure that it's noted that this wasn't included on the dashboard, for example, but it's self-calculated or locally calculated. Finally, I'd like to point out the green star in column 3. This is the target year 3 column. And this is the only other column that you'll need to fill out in this 2024-25 LCAP. And in this case, this will be a projection of where the LEA expects to see the results on the 2026 dashboard for this specific metric. We're looking forward to 2026. Importantly, this column should remain consistent in terms of both the metric itself. You don't want to switch gears and go from distance from standard to percentage meeting or exceeding standard in the course of the 3 years. You want to maintain consistency in that regard. And you also want to make sure you have the same student groups represented. So you don't want a group to fall off 1 year, even though they may remain a significant student group for you. I will note, for anybody who's done this before, this is maybe the most challenging column because, as many of you know, determining a reasonable target for student groups that addresses the gaps between student groups can be tricky. We do recommend setting expectations for any metric using feedback from those who are closest to the data source. So bring in a team of experts when setting these. It's always better to have multiple people give it some consideration. So on the next slide, I'm going to start diving into some specific priority areas and talking about some of the challenges, some of the nuances this year. So here we want to talk about the performance indicator for measuring priority 1, which is appropriately assigned and fully credentialed teachers. In this case, it's important to distinguish that LEAs will also be reporting data in the local indicator for priority 1. And in this case, it's the teacher assignment monitoring data for 22-23 that needs to be shared with your governing board at the same meeting where the LCAP is approved. And the CDE, however, has indicated that for the purposes of the LCAP, it doesn't have to be the same. You can use another metric. You don't have to put the TAMO data inside your LCAP. And notably, we're not certain when that TAMO data will be available. In fact, the local indicator guidance indicates that if it's not available, you can present the local indicator as empty because the state will automatically populate this data on the dashboard. But you do then have to share that data for the local indicator later. That doesn't hold true for your LCAP. So what you do in the LCAP may be different. You may use another source. The only thing we're recommending here is that you try to maintain some consistency. So we suggest definitely using the 22-23 data because that's what will populate on the dashboard for the TAMO data. I know it's a little bit of a lag, but to be consistent. And we also suggest using the federal definitions that guide the teacher assignment monitoring data that we've linked here. As example of a source you might use would be your HR credentials person and having them access the CalSAS report. That's a separate system that the California Teacher Credentialing Commission uses, and that ultimately informs the TAMO data. But they could probably interpret your assignments there, including local assignments as far as federal definitions. So just make sure you're always clear on what data source you're using. Next slide, please. Next, we have priority 2, the implementation of state standards. So this one's tricky. This metric or metrics that you use should reflect the LEA's implementation of academic content and performance standards adopted by the state board, including how the programs and services will enable English learners to access the Common Core academic content standards. And so in this you'll see there's another overlap here between the local indicator for priority 2 and the required metrics you have to put in your LCAP, and it's not defined exactly what you put in the LCAP. You have some choice. And what we started to see is that some LEAs are entering the same numbers, those Likert scale numbers that are in the local indicator self-reflection tool as for this particular required indicator. And while LEAs certainly have the option to use this source for the metric, we'd like to suggest that without that additional context that's provided by the self-reflection tool questions that appear on the dashboard, these numbers really do kind of lose their meaning. So as an alternative, we suggest using some of the underlying data sources that you're using to inform the self-reflection tool for priority 2. And we have some examples here. And so among them, like the count of teachers participating in content-specific professional development is one. The percentage of completed updated curriculum maps is another. So if you're doing your science adoption, for example, maybe this year, maybe you have a count of teachers who've attended trainings within that new science adoption. Additionally, you could use instructional rounds or observations and evidence of implementation of state standards or ELD, integrated ELD standards within a classroom. So these are all things that you might use to reference this. Again, you have your choices here, and I just would give some careful thought to it because I do think the use of the Likert scale from the self-reflection tool does kind of lose meaning and for your educational partners. Next slide, please. So we have some priority 4 and 5 metrics. I call these the hard to find metrics. People seem to be asking, where are these all the time? So I just want to be clear on where these are. The first one is the completers of both CTE pathway and A through G requirements. Fortunately, this year, the state has made this really easy. They did this first last year, and then this year, because people liked it so much, they've done it again. So this is a required metric for pupil achievement, priority area 4. And this can now be found on your dashboard under the additional reports tab. And they have a specific report called Met UC CSU requirements and CTE pathway completion report. So one report, you knock it out of the park. Next is reclassification rate. And historically, This has been published in DataQuest, and I'm happy to say that the most recent DataQuest update, issue number 19 that came out just a couple days ago, announced that multiple years of the reclassification report are coming this spring. However, because these are not statutorily required, the CDE has acknowledged it's taken them a long time to generate. They're not as high priority as other things like teacher assignment monitoring data, which is driven by statute. So they haven't identified a specific release date, and that may not align with your LCAP process. So you just know that there's also the ability to draw this out of CalPads, and we have some descriptions within our our LCAP metrics inventory tool to explain how to do that. Additionally, attendance rate. This is something that used to appear on DataQuest. It no longer does. This is something that you definitely have to generate locally, and you could use CalPads reports or your local student information system to generate this, but it no longer appears on DataQuest. Also, the middle school dropout rate. This is something that used to be published on DataQuest, no longer published. The only way to generate this is through CalPads. Fortunately, it's pretty straightforward, and your CalPads person could help you. There's directions for that in the metrics inventory as well. Next slide. So for priority 7, LEAs are expected to provide measures that reflect how they're providing access to a broad course of study. And it's important to note here that there is a difference between access to a broad course of study and the outcomes that are often the result of this access, which we typically find under priority 8. So don't confuse them. So access is one thing, outcomes is another. And so we're going to cover priority 8 on the next slide. There are 2 definitions of a broad course of study that are spelled out in EdCode. We've got them identified here, and those are actually links that you can refer to. And they differ by grade span. So grades 1 through 6 has one definition, grades 7 through 12 another. And we've included some examples for each of these that we have seen in LCAPs and that LEAs have also identified within their local indicators for this priority area. Some options I'd like to highlight just include the use of an on-track measurement. A lot of student information systems now have an on-track or a dashboard for students who are tracking both their graduation, being on track for graduation, also completing the UC-CSU A through G requirements, or college and career readiness, for example. So that might be one option to use here. Additionally, account or percentage of students involved in specialized courses or programs like your AP exams or CTE pathways or GATE programs, IB, visual performing arts. All those are useful, and especially it can be challenging for elementary schools, but there are things like students participating in after school enrichment, for example, or elementary orchestra or outdoor ed. So you have your core reflection on your core requirements in grades 1 through 6. It's a little bit harder to identify some additional measures, but you may have some that just jump to mind. Finally, one option that we see a little bit of, not probably as much, but would be a survey, just a perception of either parents or students as to how satisfied they are with courses or pathways that are offered. So that's a consideration as well. One consideration I'd like to also throw out there is, does your LCAP metric reflect access to broad courses student for all students? That includes your students with disabilities and your English learners, because we know oftentimes access is difficult for these students. So are you disaggregating this data in some way that's helpful to illuminate this? Or could you provide additional data source, for instance, the least restrictive environment data, which is now published on DataQuest? That might be an interesting way to show how students with disabilities have access to the broad course of study. On the next slide, we'll touch base on priority 8. And this is our final priority area. And like I said, the metrics here are often closely aligned with those from priority 7. They're like the salt and pepper. They're so closely aligned. Some examples, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I've included these in the first column. Things like dual enrollment, internships, pre-apprenticeships, students completing the state seal biliteracy. These are all other pupil outcomes that you may consider including. We also note some of the measures that I consider doing double duty here, because these are already required under priority area 4, but they often closely align with the metrics that we talk about in priority 7. For example, students enrolled in AP courses, maybe one of your priority 7 measures, and of course, students completing an AP exam with a score of 3 or greater would be an outcome. So it kind of would do double duty in this case. Next slide. And this is just our final thoughts on metrics. And I just want to note that there are a lot of metrics that you can get from multiple sources, including the dashboard, DataQuest, CalPads, and elsewhere, vendors like the College Board. And it's important to understand that there are often differences in how these different data sources apply the business rules. And this can lead to some significant differences in the outcomes. And these differences can really shape your data story within your LCAP. So it's important to select your metrics with some careful thought. And as this is the point at which you're starting a new 3-year LCAP, maybe it's time to go a different direction on a measure. And we do identify within our metrics inventory tool some of these nuances. So you may want to take a look at that to see if you're capturing the best image for your district. We've also included here a crosswalk, a link to a crosswalk between DataQuest and the dashboard, which specifies the differences in all the measures that are shared between those two. And there are some pretty significant measures. And I've got a few examples also noted here. I'll point out one as an example. So the CTE pathway completion, for example, this is available on the California School Dashboard now as part of the College and Career Indicators, College Career Levels and Measures report. But there are specific business rules for the College and Career Indicator, which don't necessarily favor your CTE completion rate, because a lot of those CTE completers, if they also complete A through G requirements, they get reflected as an A through G completer, and then you don't necessarily get it reflected there as a CTE completer, because once you're qualified for one, it goes under one column. So an alternative would be to use some CalPADS reports that might reflect a broader count, or your student information system of all the students who completed, which may be a more accurate reflection and tell a truer data story. So just wanted to put that out there. Give some thought to given the opportunity now, give some thought to your metrics, choose them wisely, and choose those that are going to tell the most accurate data story for you. And if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure we can try to address those throughout the rest of the presentation. Thanks.
We're going to shift gears now to take a deeper look at action development, and we'll see a connection to the metrics section that Hillary and Evan just presented. So we're going to look at the action development in the LCAP process and how LEA's planning process can support establishing goals and actions to achieve equity of outcomes for all students, as well as address disparity of outcomes for specific student groups. So let's take a look at this process. We're going to share a 5-step process this morning. And this 5-step process is intentional, and each step builds on the prior step. So if we can go on to the next step, next slide, please. Below the 5-step process are the sections of the complete LCAP, which include the budget overview for parents that provides an overview of the LEA's operating budget and expenditures in the current year LCAP and the LCAP for the coming school year. Then we see the 23-24 annual update, which provides an analysis of current year actions and related expenditures and their effectiveness in making progress for all students and specific student groups. This update is key. It informs the plan that LEA develops for the 24-25 school year. The template sections for the 24-25 LCAP include the plan summary and engaging educational partners sections, which inform the goals and actions section, and the increased or improved services section that provides additional detail explaining how contributing actions in the LCAP address the unique needs of students who are foster youth, English learners, and/or low-income students. These actions are provided to increase the quantity or quality of services for these students. Last are the action tables that provide fiscal detail for actions and expenditures in the annual update and in the actions and expenditures budgeted for the upcoming 24-25 LCAP year. While these steps that we're going to share with you this morning provide a frame for developing actions to be included in the goals and actions section, it is important to see how the action planning steps connect to the other LCAP sections. As we go through the steps this morning, we will make connections to the related sections. For example, you will see where educational partners are engaged in analyzing data and providing input to inform the needs and underlying causes, and how this provides essential context that informs the design and development of actions that are responsive to local needs. Our approach this morning is to begin by looking at 2 action descriptions, and then to connect the steps to each of the components in the descriptions. By looking at the complete description first, we offer a reference for what is required for the response in the LCAP prompts, and then we will be able to see the connection to the action planning steps. The screenshot here provides a description in the Increased or Improved Services section for 2 contributing actions that are principally directed to low-income students. This description connects to the actions for reading specialists and after-school literacy and arts that are included in Goal 1. Please take a moment and read it to yourself. As you're reading, you will notice that the required description responds to 3 sections in the table that address the unique identified needs, conditions or circumstance that the LEA considered for their low-income students. The next column provides an explanation for how these actions address these needs and why it is provided on an LEA-wide basis. And in the final column, the metrics the LEA will use to monitor effectiveness of these actions for low-income students and all students are indicated. The second action that we will look at today is an action description that's for a non-contributing action. And this connects to the requirement to address lowest performance levels on the dashboard. In this scenario, the action is addressing the lowest performance in math at middle schools in the district. This description is included in the Goals and Actions section in the template and does not require the additional descriptions for contributing actions. So let's connect to the steps now. Step 1 is where the LEA gathers and analyzes data. For step 1, the collection of data should come from multiple sources, such as state data from the California School Dashboard, local data that is collected at the LEA school and or classroom level, as well as data gathered from feedback provided by educational partners. Using multiple data sources and input from educational partners informs your LEA's needs assessment related to specific priority areas. Included on the slide are multiple data sources, many of which you heard about earlier in today's training, and links are included to each of these data sources for your reference. This first step is key and must be the beginning of your process, so your LEA can use relevant and timely data as a starting point that informs an understanding of the outcomes for all students and disparity of outcomes among student groups, as well as seeks feedback from educational partners that informs the unique needs in your local context. It's important to connect with multiple educational partners to gather insight from their various lenses, to learn about needs, conditions, or circumstances at the local level that are impacting outcomes for your students. So connecting with teachers, parents, principals, and students will provide unique insight about needs that are specific to your LEA. So in step 1, when gathering and analyzing data, multiple formats and presentation of this data will be helpful to support your community to learn about and analyze your district, student group, and school level data. Organizing data by statute and state priority area helps the community to see levels of performance measured by the California School Dashboard. Here, you can see data displayed for a sample district and areas of lowest performance levels on the dashboard for state priorities, and where the LEA has red indicators for specific student groups at specific schools. The dashboard student group report below is also included, showing all of the student groups in state priority areas to provide more information about performance of each of the student groups across multiple state priority areas. In addition to dashboard data, which reflects prior year data, your LEA may want to gather real-time data showing performance levels using data in the current year and share this with your educational partners. This might include interim assessment data for student groups and grade levels in the current year. Additionally, the insight from educational partner feedback gathered from students, teachers, coaches, classified personnel can be gathered in multiple ways, including through conversations, empathy interviews, and surveys, and this will help the LEA to gain a deeper understanding of areas of success and challenges. So for step 1, we'd like to draw your attention here to sections in the template that connect to step 1. So here you see in the annual update, in the blue boxes, you see where LEAs gather data and analyze this year's implementation, expenditures, and effectiveness. This directly connects to step 1. The blue star points out where LEAs provide outcome data in the year 3 outcome column. Then in the goal analysis below, LEAs provide a description of the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of their specific actions in prompt 3 by describing progress made toward their desired outcomes. In the red boxes, we draw your attention to specific sections the LEA develops for the 24-25 LCAP. In the annual performance prompt in the plan summary section, LEAs reflect on dashboard data and local data. In the engaging educational partners section, LEAs describe how feedback from educational partners influenced the development of the 24-25 plan. And in the measuring and reporting results section, LEAs include baseline data, which will include dashboard data for specific required metrics and may include local data as well. For some metrics, such as where dashboard data is required, you'll see that the data in the baseline will be the same as the 3-year outcome data reported in the annual update. It's important to make these connections so you see how sections of the template are related and work together to inform the LEA's continuous improvement process. So, connecting to our practice in steps, after LEAs have gathered and sorted their data, step 2 is to identify needs and underlying causes. This involves understanding data at multiple levels so the LEA can identify overall needs and disparity of outcomes across student groups and their peers. It also involves reaching out to educational partners to learn about conditions and circumstances in the local context that may be impacting the results for the LEA at specific schools and for specific student groups. So in step 2, we go on to the next slide. There we go, thank you. So in step 2, taking time to consider and understand the root causes impacting outcomes in your system is key to an action design process, because the same solution will not likely be responsive to the unique needs and circumstances facing students and families at the local level. Some questions to consider to identify needs and determine underlying causes are provided on the slide. For example, first looking at the distribution of results by student groups can identify equity gaps among student groups and their peers. Additionally, seeking feedback from educational partners, such as feedback from specific student groups, parents, teachers, and principals, provides multiple lenses to inform circumstances, challenges, and barriers that may be impacting the results. Taking time to seek and consider input through guiding questions and processes for root cause analysis is key to first understanding identifying and then understanding the needs, conditions, and circumstances of your students and their families. And then strategies can be designed and resources coordinated to support actions that address the needs unique to your school community. We'll take a look now at where step 2 connects to our samples. Here, the description in our prompt for increased or improved services for the 2 contributing actions for reading specialists and after-school literacy and arts clearly describes circumstances and academic data gathered and analyzed for low-income students that indicates limited foundational reading skills and limited enrollment in early grades. Additionally, the response includes educational partner feedback from low-income families that indicates many low-income students and their families have limited access to high-interest print and virtual materials. And parents have requested materials and support to increase their capacity to provide opportunities for reading and developing literacy at home in English and in the primary language. So the response reflects what the LEA learned from data and educational partners and identifies some underlying causes. In our second example, you can see where academic data for math for student groups at middle schools is considered in the needs assessment, as well as educational partner feedback from teachers and families, along with the local data from the CAS claim reports, which all inform the action for the middle school math support. So building on the context established from steps 1 and 2 is key to the action planning process. And Debbie will now take us on to the next step.
Thank you, Jeannie. Good morning, everybody. So now we're moving on to step 3, which is developing strategies to address the needs. With the ideas that Jeannie went through, we gathered and analyzed data, and we're going to use that data to identify needs. And in this third step, we will discuss how to use those 2 things to develop strategies and address those needs that we've identified. Next slide. So how will you develop strategies to address the identified needs? So remember, we didn't guess at our needs. We use data to be sure that we have a clear understanding of what our students need. And I want you to consider this analogy. When you don't feel well, you go see a doctor and they gather data before prescribing a course of action to address your issue. So think about it. They ask you questions, which is just like our engaging our educational partners. It's getting that input and that information from survey data, or from in-person meetings. And your doctor might run tests or a blood test or take an x-ray, which is more of the hard data like our state assessments. And based on that information, your doctor is going to prescribe a course of action that might include a change in lifestyle or medication. We don't know. But in this same way, you want to develop strategies that target the identified needs and have been shown to be successful. Next slide, please. So here is our example that Jeannie started with for the increase and improve action. That's an LEA-wide action. And if you can see, there's the strategies to address the needs are to collaborate, the collaboration of classroom teacher and the reading specialist, small group instruction, focused support from the reading specialist, support for parents in literacy at home, And then supplemental support after school with an integrated literacy and arts program. So note that this action is not written as to hire a literacy specialist. And why would it not be written as such? Because if it were, you want to consider the verb to hire. Once you hire someone, they've been hired, that's it, that's the end. And that's not really what this is for. It's hiring literacy specialists may or may not impact the CASP language arts. It's really the roles and the responsibilities of the position, and you cannot assume those roles and responsibilities based on the title. So your actions need to be clear and state what will address the identified needs. And it's about who is doing what for whom. When we decide how we will address these needs, it's important to use strategies that have been proven to work. And again, think about that doctor analogy I mentioned. What if your doctor said, well, I hope this works, take some aspirin, and it's been proven to be effective in a lot of things, so good luck. I don't want that, doctor, and I'm sure you don't either. You want your doctor to say, well, based on your symptoms, I see that you have fever, painful swallowing, your throat is swollen, you had a positive test for strep. So I'm going to give you antibiotics. But I also see that you're allergic to penicillin, so I'm going to give you Keflex, which is okay for those who are allergic. Based on that very clear data, a very clear course of action. So the doctors don't have to go researching. These things have already been proven to be effective to cure those symptoms. And in that same way, we want our actions to be tried and true strategies that have been researched or scientifically based to be and found to be effective for students. Next slide, please. This is our example of non-contributing actions, and this action is based upon the dashboard indicators for specific schools, and you can see that for the lowest performing in the ELA mathematics for 4 schools. But these actions are for PD, for teachers and coaches that are aligned to the adopted curriculum and the math framework, and co-planning time for teachers and coaches to use that time to plan and practice what they've learned from that PD. So these actions are not specific to our unduplicated pupils, but these are addressing the needs of the pupils at these schools. So next slide, please. Now the next step is determining the scope of action. And for the purpose of our LCAP, this step 4, it really only applies to our increase and improve action section that is for unduplicated pupils. For the scope of the action is really for our increase and improve section. And there you have 3 types of contributing actions. The contributing actions can be far-reaching across the entire LEA or across an entire school or limited to an identified student group. The determination of the scope of the contributing actions is made by the LEA. So an LEA-wide action is provided to all students, and it is over and above what the entire educational program would be for the LEA. A school-wide action may be provided at a specific school or schools within the LEA. And like our example of the literacy specialist of the after-school literacy arts program, it's provided LEA-wide, but is principally directed towards the low-income students. And so that's what the LEA-wide example would be. And a limited action is provided only to one or more of the unduplicated student groups. So only the identified students from the unduplicated student group will receive the benefits of that action. Next slide. And using our example, the action of the LE-wide endeavor is based upon the needs of low-income students. The low-income students are not the singular group that are going to benefit from this action. However, the action had been developed because of the data for the low-income students that indicated a need in support in this academic area. And the measure for effectiveness will also be directly correlated to the low-income students. So it's principally directed for low-income students. However, it's being provided LEA-wide. And now turning it over to Helen.
Good morning. So as we wrap up the practices and steps, the final step in this process is to identify measures of effectiveness. As you reflect on the goal analysis for the current year and even in the upcoming years, it's crucial and you must analyze each action for its efficacy. So as you navigate through these steps, in step 5, how will your LEA discern the effectiveness of the action in addressing the identified needs of the student group? Consider the data and reflect on what was presented earlier by Hillary and Evan. And as you evaluate your actions, whether they're contributing or non-contributing, whether they're limited in scope or school-wide or LEA-wide in scope, how will you determine whether the intentionally designed actions have indeed improved outcomes? This presents an opportunity for your LEA to tackle the disparities in opportunities and outcomes highlighted by the California School Dashboard. However, the dashboard only emerges once a year. What implications does this hold for the data? How will you monitor and track progress if data is only accessible at the macro level annually? What local metrics might you employ to measure the progress towards the intended outcome? And ultimately, how will you know if the action is effective in addressing the needs of the group if you're not measuring progress of that student group? So as highlighted in our workshop day 1, going forward with the 23-24 annual update and moving through the next 3-year cycle, the LEAs will have to demonstrate again the effectiveness of actions as part of the third prompt in the goal analysis. Again, your LEA is tasked with detailing the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of actions in achieving the goal. So as you delve into your metrics, consider which metrics can be directly tied to the action and are measurable. So let's return back to our example. In the LEA-wide action, there is a mandated metric that must be addressed for one or more of the unduplicated student groups. As illustrated in this example, specific metrics to gauge effectiveness for low-income students and for all students are assessed using district's benchmark data like DIBELS, along with qualitative data such as teacher observation logs and feedback from families and students participating in the literacy and arts program. Furthermore, the required metrics of CASP and language arts is measured and distinctly annotated with corresponding goal and metric numbers. Here we have our non-contributing action, and notice step 5 is noted in the goal analysis section in prompt 3 and in the measuring and reporting results table. As you can see, this is where LEAs specify metric to measure effectiveness for all applicable student groups. How and what will you establish as your baseline, and how and what will you establish as your target for year 3 outcome? And here it is. All practice and steps are highlighted here. Tying the components in the prompt 1 of the increase or improve section of the LCAP template, as you can see, steps 1 and 2, highlighted in blue, is tied closely to the identified needs column. Step 3 and step 4 are clearly connected to the second narrative column to show how the action addresses the need and the scope of the action and why it is provided on an LEA-wide basis. And finally, in red is step 5, the metric to monitor effectiveness, just as we discussed. And again, tying the practices to non-contributing action, the only step not listed is step 4 to determine the scope of the action, as scope applies only to contributing actions in the LCAP. So a big question that you may still have is, in the midst of many required actions in the LCAP, can a single action address different requirements? A single action might address multiple requirements. For example, a required action that is linked to DA eligibility, such as performances for ELs, a required action for PDs and language acquisition programs for ELs and/or LTELs, a required action for EL student groups performing red on this 2023 California dashboard, a single action could address them comprehensively. However, the most very important thing is to ensure that the need of the student is really thoroughly explored and analyzed, and underlying causes are fully explored. Think about when you're putting on a shirt. If you accidentally skip the first button, the whole shirt might look a bit off. That first button really sets the tone. Likewise, without a thorough understanding of the needs, which are informed by achievement data, educational partner feedback, whether qualitative or quantitative, whether California dashboard data or local measures, without this crucial step, any action risks being misaligned and missing the target. Only through the system process of gathering and analyzing and identifying the needs specific to student groups with underlying causes can your LEA devise actions designed to genuinely meet the needs of the identified student groups. So to conclude this section, we heard you and we read feedback from our workshop day one wanting additional examples. So we have included a few samples for you to refer to. These samples are intended to assist you, and we hope you find them helpful. But it's important to note that while these samples are provided, they are not considered exemplary responses, as every LEA has unique context and history. Therefore, each action should be tailored to the unique needs of your LEA student groups, your specific data, and your educational partners. And now I will turn it over to Belinda and Sean for fiscal overview section of our workshop. Take it away, Belinda and Sean.
Thank you, Helen, and good morning to everyone. We're more than halfway through the training, so thank you all for hanging in there. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So the action tables required for this year's LCAP submission are the same as in the previous year. There continue to be 5 required tables, the first 2 representing totals and calculations for the coming LCAP year, 24-25. And the remaining 3 tables display updates on revenues and expenditure estimates for the current year. Now, the data entry points for the tables may vary depending on whether the LEA is either an eLCAP or a DTS system user, but thankfully, most of the data will auto-populate. Now, one critical source of information for the accuracy reported on the tables will be the LEA's finalized LCFF calculator, keyword finalized. What I mean when I say finalized is that it must be updated with certified ADA counts, and it must be updated with the May revise assumptions. Now, the governor is scheduled to make the May revise available around May 15th. Now we're going to take a look at each table as we move on to the next slide. So beginning with the total planned expenditures table. Now this table contains information regarding the projected LCFF base revenue amount, your supplemental and concentration grant projection, also known as S&C, the projected percentage to improve and increase services, including the prior year carryover percentage, if any. Now, this is also referred to as the minimum proportionality percentage, or MPP, which we'll highlight again in the upcoming slides. And then finally, the table displays the details for all LCAP actions by funding source, then broken out by personnel and non-personnel costs. Now, that is a lot of information to display in one table, but luckily, if you're an eLCAP or DTS user, this information will auto-populate based on the data that is entered as you finalize your plan in the respective system. Moving on to the next slide. The contributing actions table contains information only for actions that contribute to increase or improve services for 24-25. Now, what is critical here, and we've highlighted it in the green boxes, is to ensure that the projected LCFF base grant amount, the projected supplemental and concentration grant amount, and the projected percentage to increase or improve services correlate with the amounts and percentages identified in that updated LCFF calculator. Now, equally important, and what we highlighted in red, is to ensure that the planned percentage to increase or improve services for the coming LCAP year, 24-25, is equal to or greater than the total percentage to increase or improve services. So in other words, an LEA must ensure that they plan to meet their MPP. Now, if you're an ELCAP user, you'll notice a new feature in the ELCAP system that will indicate whether or not that percentage is being met. And if you're a DTS system user, you want to review that percentage very, very closely. Moving on to the next slide. So now we're going to shift our focus to the tables that pertain to the current year, beginning with this annual update table. Now, in this table, it contains information about the LEA's estimated expenditures for LCAP actions compared to what was originally budgeted for those expenditures. And what's important to note here is that the LEAs need to ensure that all actions and planned expenditures correspond with the LEA's 23-24 adopted budget, LCAP. And two, just as important, when entering the estimated expenditure totals, LEAs must ensure that the amounts are as of June 30, 2024, representing the annual cost for each corresponding action. Now, oftentimes expenditures are paid after the fiscal year ends, which is June 30, 2024. These costs are also known as accrued expenses. So they still are a part of the annual cost. So it's going to be very critical, extremely critical, that program and fiscal staff work closely to make certain that all of these expenses are accounted for and included. Moving on to the next slide. Now, the contributing actions annual update table contains information only for actions that contribute to increase or improve services in the current year. Now, in this table, the LEA's estimated SNC grant amount must correlate with the district's updated LCFF calculator, as we highlighted in the green boxes. Then highlighted in red, the estimated expenditures for each action must represent, again, that annual cost through June 30, 2024. Now, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to ensure that that annual cost is captured, because if an LEA underreports, it may negatively impact the calculation that determines that total estimated actual percentage to increase and improve services. So in other words, if an LEA underreports its estimated expenditures, it may result in carryover. And so you'll want to avoid that by accurately reporting those estimated annual costs. Next slide. Now, this slide may look familiar, and that's because we want to emphasize the importance of ensuring that the estimated expenditures entered for the current year's contributing actions are equal to or less than the estimated expenditures in the annual update table. And the reason why we're emphasizing this is that in the annual update table, the estimated expenditures include all funds, while the contributing actions annual update table only accounts for expenditures funded by LCFF funds. Now, new this year for all ELCAP system users, we've embedded a safeguard in the ELCAP system that will prevent a data entry error from happening, but DTS users should triple check the accuracy of each entry. Now, moving on to the next slide. Here we have the LCFF carryover table, which calculates and displays the unmet portion of the percentage to increase or improve services, if any, that the LEA must carry over into the LCAP year. And it also displays the prior year's carryover percentage. Now, this prior year percentage will roll over for all ELCAP users, but LEAs using DTS should ensure that that carryover percentage correlates with the prior year's adopted budget. Now, a data entry for the LCFF basic grant amount must be entered in this table. And again, this information should correlate with the district's updated LCFF calculator as highlighted in the green boxes on the slide. Now, this wraps up the action table section of the training. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Sean, to go over the budget overview for parents.
Thank you, Belinda. I'm going to talk about the budget overview for parents. And so the next several slides, we're going to talk about that. So the budget overview for parents is required by Education Code, does require all LEAs to develop a BOP along with their LCAP. Now, it's a very brief, it's a very high level document. It's a 3-page summary that talks about your projected revenue by fund source for the coming year, which in this case is 24-25. Talks about your budgeted expenditures for 24-25. And then there's also the last page talks about your prior year expenditures for high needs students. So it is a standalone document. It is an Excel document. It's provided by the CDE. We do have a link to it on the next slide. Let's go to the next slide. You can see there's a link there on the slide where you can download the BOP from the CDE website. So when you download it and you open it, like I said, it's an Excel document. It consists of 6 different tabs. There's a title page, instructions, data input, narrative responses, the template, and then there's an accessibility tab. It's just the template tab that is included with your LCAP. Let's go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about how you fill this out. So a lot of it is done directly on the data input tab. And when you're filling this document out, we really want to encourage you to wait toward the end of the process. Because again, this is like a high-level summary of data that's in your LCAP, of data that's in the adopted budget that your fiscal folks are working on. So, that timeline, as Belinda mentioned, when the May revise comes out kind of mid-May, to when you actually have to adopt your LCAP and your adopted budget is it's a very compressed amount of time. And so I know everybody's working frantically, making all the updates and making all the changes and getting it ready to present to the board. So that's why we encourage you to wait till the end, till those documents are closer to a final state. And on this slide, we talk about the documents that you need. So on the right there, Form 1 for your 24-25 budget and your FCMAT LCFF calculator summary. Those are documents, if you're on the program side, that your fiscal folks are very familiar with those documents. That's what they're working on in terms of the adopted budget. The other things you're going to need are going to be the total planned expenditures table, the contributing actions table, and your contributing actions annual update table. Now, in the bottom, we have this handy dandy little handout that cross-references. So you can see it on the left on the screenshot, all those little, all the text that's in red, in the yellow, in the peach section, in the green section, are going to tell you cross-reference. Sorry, I'm in a meeting at the moment. Sorry about that. The top section is general information about your LEA. The yellow section is going to talk about your general fund revenues. The peach salmon section is your total budgeted expenditures, and your the green section is your expenditures for high needs students. So let's go to the next slide. These next few slides are going to actually show you the reference documents and where you get that information. So on your revenue side, the bottom section there is Form 1. Again, your fiscal folks are very familiar with this form. You can see the boxes in red. You see how it works. So A is going to be your LCFF sources, E is your federal revenue, other state, and all of that. So you get those numbers and then you plug them in. You also have the FCMAT LCFF calculator for your supplemental and concentration grant amount. So that's in the crosswalk, that's item B. For the almost everybody is going to be using the FCMAT calculator at this point in time. There might be a few of you that maybe have your own calculator or a different calculator. Just know that you need the supplemental and concentration grant amount for that. Let's go to the next slide. This is that peach salmon section. That's about your total budgeted expenditures. So your total budgeted general fund expenditures is going to be on Form 1, it's column F, line B9, that says total expenditures. Now, some of your fiscal folks are used to including general fund transfers out and other uses when they think about total expenditures. And that's okay. If that's the number that you get and that's the number that you want to plug into that amount field, you can, and we will accept that. But the instructions on the BOP do say line B9. For your total planned expenditures, total budgeted expenditures in the LCAP, you're going to get that from the total planned expenditures table. You can see the box in red. That's your total funds. It's that sixth column over for total funds. And then your total budgeted expenditures for high need students in the LCAP is going to be from your contributing actions table. And that's also, you can see the red box around that. Expenditures not in the LCAP, that's just auto-calculated. It's just the difference between what's in the LCAP and what's not in the LCAP. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. The green section is going to talk about the year that we're closing out. So in this case, it's going to be 23-24. It's about your expenditures for high need students. So your total budgeted expenditures for high need students in the LCAP, you're going to get from the contributing actions annual update table. It is that second column. And then your actual expenditures for high need students in the LCAP is going to be the next column over, which is the also in the contributing actions annual update table. All right, can we go to the next slide? So once you fill out the data input, there is a narrative responses tab. And there is one required response. They're brief responses. They're 75 words or less. There's one required one that just asks you to briefly talk about general fund expenditures that are not included in the LCAP. And then there's two conditional responses that only get triggered in the template under certain conditions. And those conditions are basically if your expenditures for high need students are less than your supplemental and concentration grant funding. And if that happens when you're filling out the data input tab, it'll trigger those conditions to require you to put in narrative responses for those. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this is what it looks like. For those of you that have been around, it's very similar. I'm not sure, I don't think there's any changes, but it's very similar. It's a very brief document. It's 3 pages. It's really nicely laid out with the graphs and the short explanations. Again, I just wanted to, just as a reminder, maybe have a conversation with your fiscal folks now about that time period, making sure that as you're making any changes to the adopted budget or to the LCAP, that you're coming back and you're making sure that the budget overview for parents is updated with the latest and greatest information. All right, let's go to the next slide. I think we've got some terms and definitions. For those of you that are not as familiar with all the fiscal terminology, we've put them in there for you. We're not going to go through every single one. But again, did want to, as Belinda mentioned, stress the need for, as going off of the May revise. That's an important one, and that comes out around May 15th, but it takes another week or so to really digest the information that comes out. So that's really important. But the rest are there for you and are available for you if you want to look at them. I think we've got one more page of terms and definitions. Okay. And how about the next slide? That was it for me for the budget overview for parents. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Anita from ASM.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. Okay, hi, everyone. The following slides will go over the LCAP development timeline and the approval process. So as you are all well aware, there are components that go into the development of the LCAP, and it begins in the fall and moves through the rest of the school year. And to support your planning in this process, we put together and shared a 23-24 timeline resource for you. The link to the document is provided on this slide, as well. And currently, we're in the winter-spring season of the development phase, as noted on this slide. Now, these 3 screenshots here serve as a reminder that the development of an LCAP is a process. It's a process that takes time, planning, reflection, and involves your educational partners all along the way. And the intent of this document is to offer you a guide with steps to take, key processes to implement, and reflective questions to consider so that your LCAP is comprehensive, meaningful, and compliant. And this will ensure that opportunities and outcomes are improved for all students and that your LCAP is approved without delay. So as noted on this slide, the beginning of the school year between August and November was a time to get reacquainted with local indicators, the self-reflection tools, and determine who is responsible for what. Now, December through April, LEAs continue to collect evidence from local indicators, and most recently, we've all been analyzing our dashboard data. But nonetheless, this slide serves as a reminder that local indicators also offer noteworthy information for an LEA. Often, the data we gather from local indicators and our educational partners, such as students, staff, parents, are more timely, more relevant, and introspective. And these results provide opportunities to influence
can't
the
hear it in here.
and services we plan for the upcoming LCAP. It is important for LEAs to connect the local indicator process with the LEA's LCAP development process. And the important tasks in the cycle of continuous improvement will be to analyze the data, determine the needs of students and staff, and then plan actions and services accordingly for the upcoming school year. LEAs will adopt, adapt, or abandon actions and services as part of this PDSA cycle and annual update prompts. Now, moving forward on this timeline between May and June, but no later than the 1st of July, LEAs will report results of local indicators to their local governing board or body as a non-consent agenda item. And this will be the same meeting where the 24-25 LCAP and budget will be presented to the LEA's governing board or body for adoption. And finally, between June 15th and August 15th, the LEA will upload the results of the local indicators to the dashboard. This is highlighted in yellow here on this slide, just as a reminder that the date to upload the information is sooner than last year. And also remember that LEAs will not be allowed to request changes to be made to the information after the closure of the 2024 local indicator reporting window. Once the LCAP has been developed with all the required components, including consultation with your educational partners and the SELPA, there are required steps school districts must adhere to leading up to the submission of the adopted LCAP to the County Office of Education for approval. The superintendent shall present the 24-25 LCAP draft to the Parent Advisory Committee for review and an opportunity for them to comment. The 24-25 LCAP draft is also presented to the LEA's English Learner Parent Advisory Committee as applicable to your school district for review and comment as well. The superintendent will respond to all the comments from the PAC and the ELPAC in written form. Moving forward, the LEA will notify its members of the public in its community of the opportunity to view the LCAP draft. The community must have an opportunity to submit written comments regarding the expenditures and actions in the LCAP to the LEA. Continuing on, the superintendent will review school plans as applicable to ensure that the strategies and actions in the SIPSAs are consistent with the 24-25 LCAP draft. And once these steps have been completed, you're in the home stretch. LEAs will hold at least one public hearing of the 24-25 LCAP in order to solicit recommendations and comments from the public regarding specific actions and expenditures proposed in the LCAP. This public hearing will be on the same day as the public hearing for the proposed 24-25 budget. It's like salt and pepper, they always go together. And lastly, at a public meeting held after, but not on the same day as the public hearing, the governing body or board of the LEA shall adopt the LCAP and the budget for the 24-25 school year. But in addition, the local indicator results will be presented to the governing board or body as a non-consent item at this same meeting. Specific regulations for charter schools regarding the process can be found in Ed Code 47604.33 or 47606.5, and for school districts in Ed Code 52062. And so, next slide, please. Now that your LCAP is adopted, you enter the approval phase. Statute provides the requirements and timeline for LCAP approval. So as previously mentioned, the LCAP must be adopted by the local governing board or body before July 1st. Within 5 calendar days, which does include weekends and holidays of adoption, you submit the adopted LCAP to LACO via the LCAP system. It is at this time that the formal review and approval process begins for school districts. Between the time the LCAP is officially submitted and through the end of July, school district LCAPs are thoroughly reviewed. And if necessary, on or before August 15th, the County Office of Education will request in writing clarification of contents of a school district's LCAP. Within 15 days of receipt of this clarification letter, the district shall respond in writing to the COE regarding these requests. Within 15 days of receiving the response from the district, the County Office of Education may provide recommendations in writing for amendments to the LCAP. The district must then consider the recommendations in a public meeting within 15 days of receiving them from the County Office of Education. If a school district's LCAP and, remember salt and pepper, budget are approved by the County Office of Education by the end of August or early September, an approval letter will be sent to the governing board of a school district on or before September 15th. It is important to note that the district's budget cannot be approved until the LCAP is approved. The deadline for the county office to approve LCAPs is October 8th. Next slide, please. When formally reviewing the LCAP, there are 4 criteria that must be met for approval. 1, the LEA has adhered to the State Board of Education adopted template and has followed all instructions for completing the template. Please remember that the State Board just adopted a new template for this year. The LEA budget for the upcoming fiscal year includes expenditures that are sufficient to implement the actions in the LCAP. The LEA has demonstrated how it is meeting its requirement to increase or improve services for students who are low-income English learners or foster youth. And finally, the LEA has made the required calculations to determine whether there is a carryover requirement in supplemental and concentration funds for unduplicated pupil and describes planned uses in the LCAP meeting the MPP, minimum proportionality percentage. The pre-review process offers school districts an opportunity to ensure that their LCAP team is on track to address all legal requirements in the LCAP prior to board adoption. And we appreciate the positive feedback we received from school districts about the pre-review process from last year, so thank you. And so once again, we will offer the opportunity for school districts to participate in a pre-review process before the official LCAP submission. LCAP reviewers will be reaching out to each of their respective school districts via email sometime before April. And this closes out the timeline information. Next up is Agustin.
Great, thank you, Anita, and good morning, everyone. The next few slides will cover how to successfully submit your completed LCAP in LACO's LCAP system. So as a reminder, all LEAs and charter schools in LA County will submit their 24-25 LCAP using the LACO LCAP system. For school districts, it must be submitted within 5 days of adoption. And for charter schools, it must be submitted on or before July 1st. If your LEA does not use the LACO LCAP system to develop your LCAP, you will upload a PDF of your complete LCAP, which includes the the budget overview for parents, the 23-24 annual update, the 24-25 LCAP, the action tables, and the LCAP instructions. The PDF that gets uploaded should be one single file with all of those components included in that specific order. For LEAs that do use the eLCAP system to develop the LCAP, the 24-25 template is now available in the system, and in the next section, we'll be going over the steps to roll over your 23-24 plan, as well as provide a brief overview of some key sections in the eLCAP system. Okay, so first, for non-eLCAP users, we just wanted to provide a quick overview of the steps to upload and submit a PDF of your completed LCAP. You're going to start off by logging into the eLCAP system, or if you don't already have an account, then you would need to register as a new user at elcap.laco.edu. Once you're in the system, you'll click on Manage Plans, which is located on the left menu bar under LCAP. On the next screen, you'll select the orange button that says Add New Plan, as you can see there in Step 3. Once you add the new plan, this title page that you see in Step 4 will pop up. You'll need to complete the required fields on this page, which includes the plan title and year, the date of adoption, the LEA type and name, as well as LEA contact information. For the plan year, be sure to select 24-25. At the bottom of the title page, you can see where you will upload the PDF file of your complete LCAP. Now, the system will only allow you to upload one file, so it's important to ensure that all of the LCAP components are included in the correct order, as previously mentioned. Again, at the bottom of the title page, you'll need to click on the box that says, do you want to use the PDF plan upload? And this will allow you to choose your file to upload. Once you've selected your file, you will then click on the green cloud button to upload the file. Once the upload completes and you've confirmed that the file name replaces the Choose File button, you'll need to click the Save button. The final step is to submit the plan. So next, you would go back to the plan index where you'll see an orange Submit button at the top of the screen. You will click this button to officially submit your plan to LACO. Once again, this brief overview on how to upload your LCAP was for non-eLCAP users. So before we officially wrap up, we'd like to extend an invitation to those of you who might be interested in delving deeper into our eLCAP system to stay with us for an additional section. Thank you again for your time and participation, and know that the LACO team is here to support you every step of the way. With that, I'll hand it off to Rachel Garcia, who will go over our updated eLCAP system.
Thank you, Augustine. Hello, everyone. Again, this last section of today's workshop is only applicable to those LEAs that use the eLCAP system to develop their LCAP. So for those of you who don't use the eLCAP system to develop your LCAP, we want to thank you for joining us today. And please be sure to fill out the evaluation before you go. You can find the link in the chat. So for everyone joining us for this eLCAP overview, we're going to provide just a brief overview of the system, including how to roll over your plan for the annual update, and also some of the new features due to changes to the LCAP template. And again, if you're not able to stay with us today for this overview, we are recording it and we'll post it soon. So if your LEA used the eLCAP system to develop the 2023-24 plan, you will be able to roll over the information that is applicable to the 2023-24 annual update, as well as the annual update tables. And so this includes the goals, metrics, baseline, year 1 and 2 outcomes, and the desired outcomes for 2023-24. As well as the information required for the annual update table, the contributing actions annual update table, and the LCFF carryover table. Again, only information needed for the 23-24 LCAP annual update and the annual update tables will be able to roll over. Since we are starting a new 3-year cycle, it's an opportunity to reflect on the past 3 years and to start fresh. So nothing will be rolled over into the 24-25 plan. And so we're also happy to announce that starting this afternoon, you will be able to roll over these components into the annual update. And so these next few slides provide a quick overview of the steps to roll over your plan for those LEAs, again, that use the ELCAP system to develop the 23-24 LCAP. So first, you would need to log into the ELCAP system, or if you don't already have an account, then you would need to register as a new user. If you're a new user, you will also need to be added as a user to the approved 23-24 plan in order to complete the rollover process. And so if there is not someone in your district who can add you to the approved 23-24 plan, so for example, you might have someone that left the district and they were the only one with access to that plan, then you can contact your LCAP coordinator for assistance with this process. And so once you're in the system, you'll click on Manage Plans, which again, it's on the left menu bar under LCAP. And then the next step is to select the approved 2023-24 plan. So what you can see on this screen will vary by user, depending on how many drafts were created in the system. But you should really only see one approved plan for the 2023-24 year. And you can confirm this by looking at the third column, which indicates the plan year, and also the last column, which shows the status. So once you've found the approved 23-24 plan, then you would just click on the plan title. So once you've selected the approved 23-24 plan, you will see this screen that shows the plan index of your approved 23-24 LCAP. At the top of the screen, you will see the rollover button. And so you would just need to click on this button to roll over the plan. And so after clicking that rollover button, you should see a message in green stating that the plan rolled over successfully. And again, this rollover button, it's not live in the system, but after our workshop today, it will be live in the system and you will be able to roll over your plan. So after clicking on that rollover button and rolling over your plan, you will then need to go back to the Manage Plan section to find the rolled over plan. And again, you can find the Manage Plan tabs on the left menu bar. And so in the Manage Plan section, the rolled over plan will have the word roll over and also a date and time stamp of the rollover in the plan title. And you'll see that the status will now be draft, as you can see in the example on the screen. And so remember to go back and edit the plan title to remove the word rollover and the date and time. And you can do this by going to the title page section of the plan index. So once you click on the rolled over plan, you will see the plan index as shown here in this screenshot. The plan index features all of the sections of the LCAP and allows you to navigate through the various sections as you're developing the plan. You will need to go into each section to enter the information that was not rolled over. And remember, only the information applicable to the annual update and the annual update tables will be rolled over this year. There are also some sections in the plan index which you can see have the word preview. These sections are read-only and allow you to preview certain sections of the plan, such as the goals and action tables. The data for the preview sections is actually entered in the data entry for the 23-24 action tables and also in the data entry for the 24-25 goals, actions, and budget sections. Now, many of the features of the ELCAP system are the same as last year. However, there are some new features and components due to changes to the template this year. So in the plan index, you will see a link to the budget overview for parents upload. The budget overview for parents, also called the BOP, is part of the LCAP, but it is not completed within the ELCAP system. The BOP will be completed using the CBE template and then will need to be uploaded to the ELCAP system. Only the template tab of the BOP should be uploaded. And prior to uploading, you will need to convert the template tab of the BOP into a PDF document. To upload a PDF file, click on the Choose File button to select the PDF. Then be sure to click on the green cloud button to upload the file. After clicking on that green cloud button, a pop-up will appear that shows the progress of the upload. And so once that upload completes, you'll see that the file name will replace the Choose File button. Next, we have the 2023-24 LCAP Annual Update section. And so this is a new component in the ELCAP system this year due to changes to the template. And so a new tab has been added to the plan index for this section. And so you will just click on that tab to navigate to this section. And as previously mentioned, if you use the ELCAP system to develop your current plan, then you will be able to roll over the 23-24 goals and metrics for this section. So in this section, you will just need to enter the year 3 outcome for each metric and also respond to the 4 goal analysis prompts for each goal in your 23-24 LCAP. At the top of the first screenshot, you can see the goal dropdown, which will allow you to toggle between each of your goals. If you click on the pencil icon, a pop-up will appear to enter the year 3 outcome for that specific metric. And so remember to click the Save button before moving on to another goal. LEAs that did not use ELCAP to develop their 23-24 plan, but are switching over to the ELCAP system for the development of the 24-25 plan, won't have the 2023-24 information in the system to be able to roll it over for the annual update components. So new ELCAP users will need to complete their 23-24 annual update and the annual update tables in the system that was previously used. And then we'll need to upload these components to the ELCAP system. And so only new users will see these upload features in the 2023-24 annual update tab. So if you roll over your plan, you won't see these upload components. And so please note that the 23-24 annual update and the 23-24 annual update tables will need to be uploaded as 2 separate files. One PDF file with the 2023-24 LCAP annual update, and then another PDF file that includes the 3 annual update tables. So here we see a screenshot of the data entry for the 2023-24 action tables section. This is where LEAs will enter the data for the annual update table, the contributing actions annual update table, and the LCFF carryover table. So when you click on this section, you will see 3 tabs across the top of the page. One for each of the 2023-24 tables that require data entry. And so most of the data in these tables is either rolled over from the 23-24 LCAP or auto-populated based on the data entered. However, there are a few fields where the data needs to be entered, which we'll take a look at in the next few slides. So the first tab is for the 2023-24 annual update table. And on this screen, you will see all of the actions that were included in the 23-24 plan, as well as the total planned expenditures for each action. This is where you will enter the estimated actual expenditures for each action. So you would just click on the pencil icon to enter an amount, and then click on the save icon after entering the amount. And as you enter and save the estimated actual expenditures for each action, the amount will be added to the total amount that's indicated at the top of the screen. And so just as a reminder, the estimated actual expenditures that need to be entered are the estimated cost for each action as of June 30th, 2024. So the next tab is the 2023-24 Contributing Actions Annual Update Table. And on this screen, you will see all of the contributing actions that were included in the 23-24 LCAP. Here is where you will enter the estimated actual LCFF supplemental and/or concentration grant amount for the 2023-24 year. Also, the estimated actual expenditure of LCFF funds for each contributing action included in the 23-24 LCAP. And then, if applicable, the estimated actual percentage of improved services. And again, the estimated actual expenditures for each contributing action are the estimated cost as of June 30th, 2024. So to enter these amounts, you'll click on the pencil icon to open the fields, and then again, just click on the save icon after entering each amount. One important thing to remember is that for the estimated actual expenditure amount for each contributing action, it's only asking for LCFF funds here. So if you have a contributing action that includes LCFF funds and another funding source, such as federal funds, you can only include the LCFF funds here. Another important thing to note is that for the estimated actual percentage of improved services, you will only be able to enter a percentage if the estimated actual expenditures for the action is $0. The system will not allow you to enter a percentage if there is an amount over $0. And then lastly, the other fields shown in the table are either auto-populated from the 23-24 LCAP or auto-calculated based on the data entered. The third tab that we see here is for the 23-24 LCFF carryover table. This table will calculate the LCFF carryover, if any, that will be required to be carried over from the 23-24 LCAP year into the 2024-25 plan. Most of the information in this table is auto-populated or auto-calculated. However, there is one field that LEAs will need to input. LEAs will need to enter the estimated actual LCFF base grant dollar amount. So this is the total amount of LCFF funding the LEA estimates it will receive for the current school year, so for 23-24. Excluding the supplemental and concentration grants and add-ons for the Targeted Instructional Improvement Grant Program and the Home to School Transportation Program. And so again, to enter this amount, you'll just click on the pencil icon to open the field, and then click on the save icon after entering that amount. So next we see a screenshot of the data entry for the 2024-25 goals, actions, and budget, which includes the data entry tabs for the goals, measuring and reporting results, goal analysis, actions, and budget summary. So again, as a reminder, nothing will be rolled over from your 23-24 plan into this section. Additionally, one thing to remember is that you will not be entering any information in this goal analysis tab this year because you are completing the goal analysis prompts in the annual update. So if you click on that tab, you'll see that the response boxes are grayed out and indicate not applicable. So to add a new goal, you would just click on the Add Goal button, and then you'll see that a pop-up will appear allowing you to enter the type of goal, the state priorities, a description of the goal, and an explanation of why the LEA has developed the goal. And then be sure to click on the Save button after entering information for each goal that you add to the plan. So next we see the Measuring and Reporting Results tab. And so here is where you'll be adding metrics for each of your goals. And so one thing to keep in mind is that you have to add goals before you can add metrics. And so at the top of the screenshot, you can see the goal dropdown, which will allow you to toggle between each of your goals. So to add a new metric, you would just click on the Add button, and a pop-up will appear allowing you to enter the metric, the baseline, and target for year 3 outcome. Remember, the year 1 outcome, year 2 outcome, and current difference from baseline will not be entered at this time. So you'll see that those fields will be grayed out. And then again, remember to click the Save button after entering information for each metric. So here we see a screenshot of the Actions tab. And like the Measuring and Reporting Results section, you have to add goals to the system before you can add the actions. And then once goals are added, you will see the goal drop-down that allows you to toggle between the goals. So to add a new action, you would just click on the Add Action button. And again, a pop-up will appear allowing you to enter the applicable information. So that would include the action title, description, time span, whether or not the action is contributing to increased or improved services, and then the expenditure information for the action. Also, depending on whether or not the action is contributing to increased or improved services, other fields will appear. So if the action is not contributing, the student group field will appear. Whereas if the action is contributing to increased or improved services, several other fields will appear, as you can see in the screenshots on the slide. So next we have the Budget Summary tab, which is also within the data entry for the 24-25 goals, actions, and budget. This is where LEAs will enter the projected LCFF base grant for 2024-25 and the projected LCFF supplemental and/or concentration grants amount for 2024-25. The additional fields you can see on the screen will be auto-calculated based on the information entered here and in other sections of the plan. And the amounts in lines 1 through 6 will also be displayed in the action tables. One of the new features we added this year is line 7. And so Belinda had mentioned this earlier in the action table section. And so this field will display a yes or no to let LEAs know whether or not the LEA is meeting its required percentage to increase or improve services for the coming school year based on the information entered. It's important to note that this field will not display anywhere in the actual LCAP. We've just included it here within the LCAP system as a quick reference for LEAs. And although not shown on this slide, this section also includes a view-only summary of the actions and funds in the plan. So here we see a screenshot from the plan summary section and the comprehensive support and improvement section. So the plan summary section includes 3 prompts, and all LEAs will complete the first 2 prompts, and then LEAs eligible for technical assistance will complete the 3rd prompt in the plan summary. The comprehensive support and improvement, or CSI section, also includes 3 prompts. However, this section will only be completed if the LEA has a school or schools that have been identified for CSI. And the list of schools identified for CSI was just released last week. And so for your reference, we've included the link to the CDE webpage where you can access this list. So next we have the Engaging Educational Partner section. And as you can see, the format of the first prompt in this section has changed to a table format. So to add a new educational partner, you would just click on the Add New Partner button, and a pop-up will appear allowing you to enter the applicable educational partner and a description of the engagement process used by the LEA. Remember to include all required groups that the LEA must consult with when developing the LCAP. And also, not shown on the slide, there is a narrative response box to respond to the second prompt in this section. Be sure to hit the Save button in the pop-up after entering the educational partner information, as well as after entering the response to the second prompt. So next we see a screenshot of the first part of the increased or improved services section. The fields shown on the slide here have not changed from last year. So for these fields shown on the slide, there is only one that requires data entry. LEAs will need to enter the projected additional 15% LCFF concentration grant amount for the 2024-25 school year. The other fields that are shown here will not need to be entered. These fields will be automatically populated from data entered in other sections of the ELCAP, such as the budget summary section and the LCFF carryover table. Continuing with the increased or improved services section, here we see some screenshots of the prompt for the LEA-wide and school-wide actions, as well as the prompt for the limited actions. And so you can see that the format of both of these prompts has changed to a table format. So to add descriptions for LEA-wide and or school-wide contributing actions, you would just click on the Add Descriptions button, and a pop-up will appear to enter the required information. To add descriptions for limited actions, it's the same process. You would just click on the Add Descriptions button in the Limited Actions section, and again, a pop-up will appear to enter the required information. And for your reference, above each section, you will see a list of your LEA-wide, school-wide, and or limited actions so that you can be sure each action is addressed within the applicable prompt. And then in addition to the 2 prompts that you can see on the slide, the increased or improved services section also includes 2 additional prompts and a staff to student ratio table that must be completed if applicable to the LEA. So once the plan has been completed and adopted by your local governing board, LEAs will officially submit the plan to LACO by clicking on the orange Submit button that's located in the Plan Index at the top of the screen. So for school districts, after the plan is submitted, the status in ELCAP will change from draft to submitted. Your superintendent will then receive an email request to authorize the submission of the plan. And once the superintendent has authorized the submission, the status will change to authorized and the formal review process will begin. As a reminder for pre-reviews, please do not submit the plan in the ELCAP system. Instead, email the PDF of the draft plan to your assigned LCAP coordinator. You can download a PDF of the plan by clicking on the Download PDF button located in the Plan Index. And also, just please note that the pre-review process is only for school districts. So we are in the process of finalizing our ELCAP user guide and hope to have it posted by the end of next week. And so this user guide is intended to provide a quick overview of the features and functionality of the ELCAP system. It will be posted on our LACO Canvas page, and it'll also be accessible within the ELCAP system. So to access this guide in the LCAP system, you would just click on the LCAP instructions in the left menu bar, as you can see on the slide. And so this will take you to the LCAP resource file screen, where you'll be able to access the user guide once it's finalized. And then just as a reminder, in addition to the user guide, it's important to also reference the CDE LCAP template instructions to make sure that you're fully addressing the LCAP requirements and the prompts. So remember, the prompts are for the readers and the instructions are for the LCAP writers. So if you're just responding to the prompts on the screen in the LCAP system and not referring to the actual LCAP instructions, you might not be addressing all that's required for the prompts. And so that concludes our workshop for today. A big thank you to our partners in accountability and data literacy, and also business advisory services for sharing all of the great information on the metrics, action tables, and the budget overview for parents. Also, thank you all for joining us today. And please be sure to fill out the evaluation. And if there are any additional questions, please leave them in the chat and we will get the Q&A out to you as soon as possible with responses. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.